Okay, I see my someone. So I have to look at the camera. Like,
Yes, you have to
hi,
look
everyone.
at the camera.
So thank you so much for having me, Raffaella. It's really an honor and a pleasure to introduce the Italian Pavilion today and try to talk a little bit about my curatorial practice, as well as in general how I conceive art and contemporary art, because I'm specialized in contemporary art today. I think the time.
Start talking, and I would take my time to share the screen. Sorry.
So just a little brief introduction. The Italian Pavilion that I'm talking about right now is organized and produced by the Italian Cultural Institute in Seoul, which is one of the 84 offices of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, which aims to promote Italian culture and language abroad through various events that spans any kind of like any type of culture and creative fields, such as art, design, music, dance, as well as cuisine and fashion. So any type of like creative field from Italy, they try to promote it in the various countries under the auspices of the Italian embassy. And especially they're very much devoted to cultural exchange. So the idea that not only we present Italian culture, but we find a cross-cultural exchange and activities that can have like a create meaningful conversation between the hosting country and Italy itself. So the Italian Pavilion is one of these example of events that is presented by the Italian Cultural Institute, with which I have collaborated before through some activities in the previous years, in 2021, especially related to contemporary arts, such as the how will I call it in English? The Day of Contemporary Art. So every year, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation has this day in which they promote Italian contemporary art in collaboration with the Association of Italian Museums. And so basically abroad, we create events in which we can talk about the contemporary art landscape in Italy. So we had since 2021 two talks involving some artists and talking about like matters that are important to the contemporary landscapes, as well as for Italy, such as sustainability and how art and sustainability can actually find a conversation together. So that's how basically I got in touch and I started working with the Italian Cultural Institute, and that led to this amazing experience of the Italian Pavilion. To just introduce myself very, very quickly, so you know who I am and why I'm here. So I am an independent writer, curator, researcher. I'm currently finishing my PhD in cultural studies at the Graduate School of International Studies at HUB in Seoul, this program led me to Korea because I was really interested in the intersection between art, contemporary art, and cultural policy. I'm also specialized in cultural policy. I had a master's degree in cultural policy that I obtained in the UK. And I'm also an art historian, thanks to my view in history that I did in Milan. Some like very specific previous working experience that can explain a little bit and how to frame my practice in contemporary art. I was assistant curator and researcher at CERN, so the European Center for Nuclear Research in Geneva, which is a place in which we investigate the basically fundamental origins of like our universe and how our universe is exists. And they have like a very beautiful artist residency in which artists are put in conversation with scientists. So for 1 up to 3 months, artists can come to the lab, which was one of the biggest research center in the world actually, and they can get in touch with particle physicists as well as like theoreticians, mathematicians, and they can exchange about a lot of ideas on, you know, like how the world is and our universe is composed of, but also like questions such as like what is dark matter, or like, you know, all these questions that seems like so abstract, but that find a very good intersection between art and physics, because artists are also always interested in like the fundamental experience of like being human or like of the world. So like these investigations find really, really good conversation, and I believe that art and science and technology are really have the possibility of really creating beautiful and meaningful conversations. So that was something that I also tried to explain in and explore in the Italian Pavilion. I also worked at the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology in Liverpool, which is also another kind of like museum, which explores this conversation between the three fields. I've been a professor in a visiting lecturer, in art theory at Elisava University in Barcelona. And I worked also on a very big project during the pandemic, which also, I think, helped me frame how you can create like very big event where like a lot of artists are involved. So during the pandemic with artist Valentina Buzzi, which I also presented at the Italian Pavilion, we did this very beautiful project called Human Science, in which we asked to artists all over the world, and we had actually 200 artists from 50 different countries to contribute with basically a performance or interpretation of like their feelings during the pandemic, very beginning of the pandemic. I'm talking about March, April 2020, through dance and voice. So we were able to get in touch with like dancer, choreographer from all over the world, as well as not only singers, but also really bearer of traditions of voices. So we also had the chance to work with people that are considered as like intangible heritage, which is something really, really incredible. And it was a very interesting coordination because our core team was spanning between Italy, Turkey, and UK. And then we had all these artists collaborating, and we created first everything digitally because, of course, during the pandemic, there was no other chance. But afterwards, we were able to present this project for Manifesta 13 in Marseille, which is a very important biennale. It's an itinerant biennale. So it's a biennale that every 2 years moves to another city, and especially focuses on cities that can have urban regeneration thanks to art and culture, which is also a very interesting intersection between art and cultural policy initiatives. So that's how all of this led me basically here to Korea. And so you can have an idea of who I am. I already introduced the Italian Cultural Institute before, so I think we can move. But I would love to let you know that you have here on the small table, you have like our catalogs of the pavilion, as well as the brochure of the and bookmark of the Italian Cultural Institute, so you can have like all the information. And also I am bringing the greetings from the director, Michela Magri, who unluckily cannot be here because she has a very busy schedule, but she hoped to welcome you all at the Institute. So if you were interested to know more about the activities as well as want to visit, feel free to get in touch and we'll be happy to show you around. And now let's get into the Italian Pavilion. So the Gwanju Biennale, for those who don't know about the Gwanju Biennale, the Gwanju Biennale was founded in 1895 in Gwanju, South Korea, which is a very specific city because it's the city where the Gwanju uprising during the military regime in Korea happened, and started to lead to one contribution to the democratization of Korea, to make it to say it in a very simplistic way. So during the uprising in 1980, there was this like fight for democracy, and the city wanted, in honor to this movement, to kind of like recreate itself thanks to art and culture in homage to democracy. So it's a very strong biennale that really aims in its various editions to speak about meaningful topics in like sociocultural environment. And we have now the 14th edition, which is directed by Sokyun Lee, which is a fantastic curator. She is a curator from Tate, especially the Hyundai Research Program at Tate. And the title that she gave for this year's was Soft and Liquid Like Water. So these ideas of water being seemingly weak, but actually has a very strong capacity of regeneration. And regeneration in general is a theme that continues to speak across like the various sections of the Biennale in various ways. So whether it's related to social constructions, whether it's related to traditions or to sustainability environment, this idea of regeneration is these ideas of a revolution that is soft, so it doesn't have to be immediate, but has to be continuous and gentle is something that is really much explored by the various artists that are presented at the Biennale. And to go on, to talk a little bit about the Pavilion project. So the Italian Pavilion is part of the Pavilion project, which is started in 2018. So we are now at its third edition, where the Biennale kind of like mimicking a little bit the model of the Venice Biennale. If you might know, at the Venice Biennale, every 2 years, there's various pavilions from all the various countries, and each country can present their like program and artists and frame it in a certain curatorial way. And it's a way to enhance, of course, cultural exchange between the hosting country and the various pavilions. The pavilions are usually not managed, but like organized or promoted by leading institutions of the various countries, as well as embassies or cultural institutes. And so the Biennale, the Gwanju Biennale since 2018 started trying this framework as well in Gwanju. So it's the only 2 biennales in the world that have actually right now this kind of program. Again, under the spirit of mutual exchange, in terms of culture, in terms of art, as well as in terms of like various themes that the various countries think that are interested. Of course, a very peculiar thing, if I want to be a bit like theoretical about the Biennale, is that they're very interesting places because it's where a cultural diplomatic framework meets an artistic and curatorial direction, meaning that there's always like a top-down approach in programming that meets a bottom-up approach from the curatorial part. So it's where a little bit diplomacy and resistance meet, which is always very interesting because you have a lot of like occasion in which various themes are explored in a very complex way because they have all these different layers that play. And I think that this is extremely interesting, especially right now where we talk about themes such as like the environment or social issues, etc. Biennale are always places in which a lot of these kind of themes are explored in various ways. So to talk a little bit about the Italian Pavilion. So the title is "Che cosa sogna l'acqua quando dorme," which in English means "What does water dream when it sleeps?" And what I love about this title that we thought a lot about it. There was this moment in which we were like, how should we name our pavilion? It's so difficult to find a name that kind of like incorporates and encapsulates the curatorial and artistic statement that you would love to offer. We wanted to shift the perspective from human to a more, I would say, comprehensive vision of like the natural world. So by asking what water dream when it sleeps, we are shifting the idea of dreaming, which is something that we associate so much to humans, but also animals do dream, to something that is considered just as a natural element. So how would water dream? But in this way, we're trying to shift the perspective, which is one of the main themes, I would say, of the Italian Pavilion. And I would say that the Italian Pavilion explores mostly 3 leading themes, which are sustainability, change and transformation. What we wanted to have was trying to embrace these ideas that change and transformation are actually something that are very much part of ourselves, as well as very much part of like any living beings. So this idea that we exist in constant transformation means that we are not fixed into certain paradigms, but we can continuously change and evolve and direct towards like new ways of understanding the world. And that is really pretty much linked to the idea that a lot of times when we talk about, for instance, like environmental issues, ecological issues, etc., we kind of like our mind basically relates a lot to like the sociocultural framework that we have and we exist within. And those are called paradigms. So the idea that a paradigm is something in which we frame our thinking. But if we accept the idea that paradigms can actually change and transform and consist, it's something very, very difficult. It's very easy to say, but very difficult to actually do it in practice. But if we instead of accepting these ideas, the change is like something that is really much intrinsic, then perhaps we can have this transformation happening. So that was something that we wanted to explore. And it's kind of like the macro theme, the leitmotif of the pavilion that every artist that we have invited then explores in their own way. So we will see how. So yeah, sustainability, change and transformation. Sustainability, of course, is something that is very much important today, in a sense that, of course, we know that we are in a moment in which we need to like look at how we exist and how we can exist together within like a wider concept of like who we are in relation to the world we live in, and like how can we make our practices sustainable, how we can make our existence sustainable. And this really has declinations, I would say, like any kind of field, both like in any kind of field. So that is something also very important for Italy itself. So it was a thing that we really wanted to explore with the Italian Cultural Institute. It was very much important for us to look at. I will like shift the theoretical part, but maybe just 1 second, if you can go back 1 second. Just very, very specific like few words about like some themes that are very important for us. So for instance, post-anthropocentrism, this idea of like we have been living in this anthropocentric paradigm, so the idea that man is at the center of the world, and right now we're trying to shift to something that is post-anthropocentric, so something that is not anymore centered around humans, but humans becomes find their place in a horizontal scale with like all the other living beings. And this is something that the artists really want to explore. And then I talk about paradigm shift and the idea also of having a pavilion that will speak both to the local community, so to Gwanju and to Korea, but also could translate to a universal kind of like audience. So the idea that like various works have been done during residencies in Korea, so I have an identity that is really rooted in the local, but at the same time the artists were able to like talk in a more universal scale, and that was something that we want to really to bring. And the idea of gentle nudge is something that I really love. It actually terms that come from behavioral economics, so shouldn't really be much something related to art, but this idea of like a gentle push, that if you try to like create a framework that already contains a push towards something that needs to change, it helps it change. So this is something that I always love that a concept when I wanted to incorporate in the pavilion. Go on. So these are the artists of our pavilion. We have Camilla Alberti, Yuvala Vital, Marco Barotti, Agnes Question Mark, and Fabio Roncato, representing 5 artists, and I'm gonna dive deep a little bit more into the practice. So this is the sculpture installation that we presented from Camilla Alberti, which is called Learning in This Binding, created during a residency in Ansan at the Seoul Institute of the Arts from January to March 2023. Camilla Alberti is an incredible artist that really incorporates in her practice the ideas of like both interspecies coexistence and post-anthropocentrism. And she imagines this creature because Learning in This Binding is related to one of her series, which is called Unbinding Creatures, in which she reimagines basically the idea and symbol of monsters. So monsters have always been these creatures that basically invade either our dreams or nightmares, either fairy tales. They are the bad guys in the fairy tales, right? But what she wanted to do was to shift this idea of monsters as something negative, to try to rethink about the identity of monsters as something that is not really possible to frame into one category, because everyone has their monsters, right? But rather this hybrid identity and this idea that they cannot be framed in a category. She wanted her to basically shift it to a positive perception of monsters as hybrid creatures that really can incorporate this idea of change. And how she does that, she does this very beautiful process when she creates her artwork, which starts with urban archaeology. So if you can please the slide. Yes. So urban archaeology is a practice that has the artist exploring the territory she is around. and finding objects that are abandoned. Uh, and she wants to shift our perception of abandoned objects, because when we think that something is abandoned, we think of something that doesn't have and doesn't hold life anymore. But in the moments that we humans abandon something, other species start to occupy it. So it becomes an ecosystem for something else. And so she tries to like really look at these connections, also because abandoned objects tell so much about a place. And she brings these objects and she creates this culture with different abandoned objects that can be anthropic, but can also be natural, can be also related to industry as well. She uses a lot of like steel or iron, for instance, that she finds as well. And by recombining all these objects together in the like sculptures, tend to like a process which sees plasters, bandages, connecting the various wires and objects. She wants to really show how like this interconnection between objects can tell multiple stories of coexistence. And what's it's really interesting about her is that she works together with other species. So she works with silkworms, with bees, with wasps, with mushrooms and fungi and mycelium to create her sculpture. So she really put in practice her theoretical framework very much. You can go on. So this was the residency done at the Seoul Institute of the Arts. These are her works in the making. So she not only did this residency to produce her work, but also to enter in touch with the student community, talk about like all her various practice, and she basically did a lot of workshops and lectures. And at the end of the program of the residency, all the students were invited to create their own sculpture with their found objects and trying to follow up her method. And it led to also a lot of meaningful conversations. And we have a very beautiful video at the pavilion. So if you want to visit and see, you can have more insightful information about it. And the second artist I would like to talk about is Fabio Roncato. Fabio Roncato also undertook a residency at the Dongguk Museum of Art, which is the venue that hosted our pavilion, and at Hangar Studio, which is a studio that makes ongi jars. Ongi jars are very traditional jars in Korea that are used for everyday activities. They are containers, for instance, for kimchi making, as well as for water in the past. And so they occupy really much the cultural matrix of Korean tradition. And Fabio was really inspired to use these ongi jars in relation to a site-specific conceptual framework of his relation with Gwanju. So when I started talking with Fabio in October 2022 about the project, because he works a lot in the understanding of materials and the specific relation to a place, I started talking to him about Gwanju, the uprising, but as well as the idea of like change and transformation. And they made him read a book by Han Kang, which is a very famous Korean writer, which is called Human Act, and talks actually about the Gwanju uprising in a very crude and human way, but very, very interesting. And he was so much inspired by it. So when he arrived in Gwanju, I made him also connect with the archives of the ACC, the Asian Cultural Center, so he could also research in the history of Gwanju as well. And then he started collaborating with this ongi masters. So he went to the countryside of Gwanju in the middle of nowhere, and he started learning about the technique. And he made his own jars in alabaster plaster. So plaster can be molded very easily by water. So what he did, if you can, is that after casting the vase, he let the water give the ultimate shape and form to the jars. So he actually, the picture taken and under the waterfall, he actually hiked a whole mountain in Gwanju, and with the jar on his back, and then like let the waterfall mold the jars. And if you go on, you can see actually the effect that it had. So the very beautiful side of it is that it is very much connected to the local history and territory, but as well, it talks about something that is very much universal, which is the ideas like gentle and slow transformation, and how water has this potential of like shaping and flowing And the jars also reflect something that we have very much rooted in Italian history, art history, which is the idea of non finito from Michelangelo. So the idea that, you know, you don't, when something is not finished fully, and it's open, give this openness that leads up to like so many potential opportunities for meaning and understanding. So then we have Marco Barassi. So Marco Barassi works at the intersection between art and technology, and he works in collaboration between a lot of scientific institutions worldwide. What he does is that he's very much interested in environmental sustainability. And so for this project, CLAMS, that we started in 2019, but we had an ad hoc artwork based here for like Gwanju, is that he mimics this idea of like Seoul with being natural water pollutant, filters for water pollution. So they basically filters the water from like the pollutants. And so what he does is that, mimicking that, he creates these shells which are made of recycled plastic, and their processor responds to the data of water pollution and water quality of the various rivers or like bodies of water that he works with. So in this for Gwanju, he worked with the Yongsangang, so one of the main river of Gwanju. So he went to like record all the with the special water quality filters or the water quality, and then like he transmits it into what is called a microtonal soundscape. So the data that are driven by the water quality are translated into music, because he has a background as a composer. So when you go and you see, there's like this microtonal soundscape that starts, and the more the pollution is high, the more they almost choke. Like there's like this rhythm becomes very frenetic, and the more they're clean, the more it becomes very peaceful and really appreciable to listen. And it is very poetic, but also a very good way to, you know, like show you that there's art can also like can translate into poetry, something that is really sad sometimes. So like, you know, like environmental issues and crises, thanks to this kind of work, can maybe start like thinking about it and like think about what does it mean. So we also have a documentary that talks a little bit about the process and everything, and can show what Marco does at the pavilion. And recycled plastic comes from an NGO that collects plastic from pharmaceutical companies, and then gives it to artists or like the cultural art institutions to make work out of that plastic. And then we have the second last artist, which is Ivala Vital, which is the artist with which I collaborated in Italy for the Human Sign project. It was presenting foreign bodies. So Ivala Vital is an artist that I really appreciate, because his art dives deep into the archetypal and ritual roots of humanity. So he works a lot with ritual. He travels around the world and discovers how the various ritualistic aspects of heritage. So how much, you know, beware of like ancient traditions or specific rituals that are in the various cultures, and he tries to create a conversation and work together with those viewers to create art. His art is really much encompasses any kind of media. So he works with painting, he works with sculpture, he works with media art, sound. It also has education as a composer, and he works with sound a lot. So sound is really a very much meaningful component of his work, as well as performance. So Frame Bodies, in his original work, started in 2017, works with dancers, and mostly ballet dancers. So dancers that are trained to, you know, have everything very much rooted into choreography, into training, into like very specific kind of like approach to movement. And what he does, he collaborates with these dancers and make them improvise to something that is called body score. So he creates this positions that mimic human conditions or feelings or emotions, and then ask them to improvise. And for trained ballet dancers, he worked with ballet dancers from La Scala di Milano, which is like one of the most important companies in Europe. And imagine them having to improvise. So it's really beautiful. And what it does is that they do improvise in relation to nature. So foreign bodies talk about this idea of foreign body, which is a medical condition, is a medical term. You know, when a foreign body becomes in contact with your body, it actually creates like a sickness or like a specific condition. And so he sees humans as the foreign body within nature. So the idea is that he talks about the lost relationship between humanity and nature, and that he sees as fundamental root of like our contemporary condition, I would say. And so this opposite was developed into 3 parts between Switzerland, Italy, and Germany, specifically Tuscany. Was brought here in Gwanju into a smaller version because we didn't have so much space. So we have like 5 video and audio sound artworks together with test-specific paintings and drawings done by the artist. And as well, it collaborated with 3 Korean performers to create the performance as well. So you have to, does it work? Oh, good. It works. You can go like a little bit like further, like in the middle of it. Yeah, so you can show, yeah, like this. So it's very strong performance. And the artists are really invited to improvise. So it's 1 hour full of improvisation that comes after 3 days of training, in which the artists start to really open a conversation with like the most like archetypal and deep part of every dancer. It's really, really beautiful and really, really strong. So it was fantastic to see the audience react to it in various ways. So this was during the VIP Press opening, and now we have like the video recordings, of course, but it was fantastic how people like would come, would see the performance, would be very scared of it at the beginning, but then little by little they would like be invited to interact with the performers and to be really part of like the full artwork that is so immersive that becomes a ritual itself. So that is something really beautiful. So Agnes is a fantastic performer. She performs in aquariums underwater. So Agnes works a lot in the idea of posthumanism, so becoming more than human, and especially posthumanism related to water. So she has a very strong connection to water because her father was a sailor. So since the very beginning of his childhood, she was like so much linked to the sea. So she developed this idea of posthumanism, so becoming more than human, but more than human in harmony with the sea as a response to like today environmental conditions. And what she talks about a lot is this idea of like transformation, which comes from the body, but also relates to like our own condition as humans. So she loves to call herself a trans-species artist. So she goes beyond human, and she really connects and wants to show us how we can go back to water, as water is an element that since our very birth, so like, you know, in the womb, is part of us, and we exist thanks to it, and invites us to see the sea as not anymore a resource, but rather like a place in which we can exist. So this is, yeah, another short video to show you how this looks like. Yeah, you can go like exactly. So what was crazy is she does this performance for like 45 minutes inside the water, and I would ask her the first time I see her, like, are you comfortable? Because I don't look good. And like and she tells me, I feel more comfortable inside than outside. So that's how much she like has embodied this whole conversation that she has with water. And we also presented some of her some of her sculpture. So her sculpture, which is very more, the aesthetic is very much pop-ish, like really much rooted into like, I don't know, like sea punk as an aesthetic that is not inspired. So she's both informed by science and by mythology. So she does a lot of investigations into mythology in manuscripts from the Middle Ages to the 16th century. So she looks a lot into the work of illustrator, which was called Ulisse Aldobrandi, who lived in the 16th century and illustrated all the sea monsters possible that were written into the European mythology. And so she recreates this being that are always in between. So that's something really, really interesting as well. And that's all for the artist. And I wanted also to really, really quickly talk about how we envisioned the pavilion in terms of design, because it's really important as well to find a way to accompany the public towards the exhibition and find a way to make all the works kind of like relate to each other and in harmony, which was not easy. So we teamed up with architects and space designers for Multiplastico, which are based in Doha and Seoul, but they're actually Italian and Korean. And we created this path that likes water and like waterfall would lead to the various artworks. And if you go on, we also did this like very much participatory thing, which was that, oh, can you go just like one back? Yes. So what is really important, I think, for art today is to like become something that is participatory. So the idea is very much rooted into a more complex conversation, but art has always been for the elite, right? Historically, that's how art has been constructed socially and culturally. So institutions since the, I would say, 21st century started to realize that and to change that. So how do you break that invisible barrier that make people not interact with contemporary art, that make people not want to enter in the museum, that feel like art is not for them? The idea comes from a scholar which is called Nina Simon, which wrote this very beautiful book, which is called Participatory Art and the Participatory Museum. And she talked about how we can open and develop like new ways of inviting the public, any kind of public, to the museum itself and to see contemporary art. So you make things participatory, meaning that the spectator is not anymore a mere spectator, so someone that passively consumes art, but becomes an active consumer of art, and their passage becomes something that interacts with the artwork itself. So we had various spots in the pavilion that follow this kind of methodology, but we wanted to have everyone answer at the end of the visit to the questions. So we had this acrylic vinyl put acrylic mirror-ish put in front of the title at the end of the path of the journey of the pavilion, in which everyone could answer. And it was really fun because I didn't know if like people would actually like respond to that, but that was the first picture is after like just 1 week. There was like no space anymore. And we had like so many beautiful answers. Some were like ironic, others were just like a signature of people that would come. Others were actually very philosophical, so it was really fun. And also especially for kids. So kids can just go there and draw and like think and like say their things. It's really nice. And we also developed an app with thanks to the collaboration with a startup called Particle, which develops app for enhances visitor experience, but inside the exhibition and outside the exhibition. So we have two routes for the Italian Pavilion. One that enhances the experience inside. So we have some some AR experience within the pavilion, as well as like some in-depth explanations about every artist, so everyone can like if they're interested, they can actually look a little bit more into like every artist or like the concepts of the pavilion, etc. And then for everyone around the world that wants to see our pavilion through the app, you can actually explore the whole pavilion. and all its contents, and I think it's like really, really fun and interesting to do, as well as it's a possibility to really enhance this experience, especially if how to do that in Korea, because of like how technology is very much rooted into like everyday practice as well. So this is like just a presentation very fast, like how the app works. You have like, you can start the experience. I didn't do it because it would have been very long, but you have like the whole path, and then you have like for every person, every artist, every content, a lot of like in-depth content in video, image, and text that can tell you more about our opinion. And that's all for me. So thank you so much for listening to like my that's our whole team after the opening, where finally we were relaxed after a lot of tension, a lot of cries, a lot of tears, a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, like oh. So that we were happy after the opening. We're like, okay, we made it. Which is not really easy to make a project so big, but we managed, so we're very happy. So that's it.
Thank you very much.